And so that now, because she comes back in 1940, what did we say, 15 or 14, I forget. It was returning in 15. And I think he must have realized that, Nancy Ruth, so her mother passes away in 1916. Now, here we now, Martha back in New York, probably going back to, mom passed away. And so, speaking from one giant to another, Sarah Farmer now at the inn at Greenacre by High School. There's Sarah Farmer right there. And that beautiful property that, of course, as we know, that later on Abdu'l Baha visited and was welcomed at. So here you now have 1918, the end of World War One. Here you have Fanny Knobloch, Martha on the left, and Julia Goldman. I have to admit, I don't know all too much about Julia Goldman, but I want to study her because if she was in those three women, because Ida Finch, that I'll do another presentation on one another day, and Fanny Knobloch go to a pilgrimage together, Flowers of Akka, right? And there's a written up, and it's a very, very well-known publication. So here we are now, Harry Randall, okay, and Agnes Alexander on the right, and of course Martha on the bottom left. It's a wonderful picture. It's probably taken at Greenacre, I'm assuming, because I couldn't quite attest to that, but I'm almost sure that that would be taken at Greenacres. Now, it is, right? Yeah. So here we go now. The Master's response to Martha's letter, November 7th, 1918, in which she expressed the wish to teach the faith throughout the world. She comes back from a world trip. She convinced now that this is what the rest of her life will look like. And she says, my hope is, and here is what Abdu'l Baha says to her, my hope is that thou mayest forget rest and composure, and like unto a swift flying bird, thou mayest reproduce the melody of the kingdom. I mean, can you even imagine receiving something like that? And my question is, if I say, hey, Abdu'l Baha, I want to go around the world, and he sends me this, would I really do it? Would I really forget the rest of my life and composure? And you know what I mean? Just because you get this wonderful letter and you write it, the Universal House of Justice in 1999 wrote to you, everybody in this meeting, wrote to you, leave your mark behind. It is the same as this letter here. We have been begged by the House of Justice to leave your mark behind. And it goes on to say all the sacrifices and all the sacrifices like never in your past and all that. It's like this. This is not ended. This is not just for Martha, oh, the amazing Martha. But I just wanted to make mention of that at this time, because here you now have 1919. Now we just said the World War One stopped. In 1919, the unveiling of the tablets of the divine plan. See that little girl in the front? There's Ruhia Khanum, or May Maxwell. And she was one of the little girls. She talks about that. What they did, they had this really fancy divine plan. And they had a little curtain in front. And then it was her given bounty that day to open the curtain, da 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 da, and there was a divine plan. And there you see this amazing gathering at the McAlpin Hotel in New York City. Okay, so just in case we wondered where it was. But isn't it wonderful to see the pictures of those that are, that were present? Okay. Now, having now launched that, this is where Shoghi Effendi later, and God passes by, page 386, he later wrote that Martha was the first, not the seventh, not the 20th, And look at all the Baha'is by 1918. We had in this country, in the hotel in New York, at the unveiling, all the people present. This was not a small gathering. And there's Martha, the first to arise in the very year the tablets of the plan were unveiled, to put the plan into action. It is confirmed by the Guardian. I mean, I've never been the first of anything. Well, I've been the first in a couple of things, but nothing important. But to be the first that arose in the very year the tablets of, oh my God, and she never stopped. So now what happens is, there she is, New York City, right? From there, remember, she didn't live there. From there, she looked at the little hotel room, whatever she had. She packed it in her little suitcase, and off she goes. July 22nd, 1919. Off she goes. You notice by sea. And having crossed the Pacific and having crossed the Atlantic by sea, I'm going to tell you, at a time before stabilizers were the big deal, it's a miserable trip. And by 1919, I can only imagine what traveling was like at that time. But forever, the editor and reporter, every night, Martha would be talking, giving slide presentation, because remember, she'd been around the world once. So she had plenty to talk about. So there she arrives, right in Belém in Brazil. And you can see where the boat landed there, right at the top. It's right on the mouth of the river coming in, right? And she now gets off the boat. And basically, that's what she was looking at. So, and being a single woman and looking at basically Brazil at that time, and we know from the Greenland expedition later on, when Ruhia Kanum goes down the Amazon River, what it looked like. It didn't look, much improved, but I can only imagine in 1919 what it looked like in Brazil at that time. That's basically what she was looking at. So what happens is now she gets off the boat, right? And then she goes down to Pernambuco. I'm sorry, my Spanish pronunciations is not very good. But Fortaleza. Oh, no wonder. Thank you. Of course it's Portuguese. Silly me. No, silly me. Anyway, so eventually, so now we're in August 11th, right, 1919. And then she goes to the city of Bahia. Sounds so much like Bahia, doesn't it? And I can see, she said, oh, what's that city? Anyway, it's down there. And she goes down there. And of course, she makes sure that she gets there. And she talks about her travel. She said, Jupiter shone brightly, steadily, unmoved in its course. She was very aware of when you're in the jungle or you're out at sea, when she just left the oceans, she's going into the jungle. I have not been in the jungle. I've been out in the ocean plenty of times, for months at a time, I might add, not just a little cruise. And at night, when the light goes down, the stars, they're practically, you feel you can reach out and touch them. They're just that close. They just come down. And when you look at Jupiter and all the stars up there, you know them by now, and you know your course, and you look at the stars, it becomes part of you. It becomes part of your life. And her card now reads Martha Elrue, journalist. And interestingly, it goes something like here. She said, did you ever know my cousin Lua Getzinger, Lillian Vegas shares? And so in Brazil, she meets Lillian Vegas. And apparently it's a cousin of Lua Getzinger, which is very, very cool because I have often eaten in Abdul Baha's home. My father knew Baha'u'llah. Imagine what she's entering into. Some of the early pioneers started to arrive. And when she went through certain villages, she met some of the pioneers or the children of the pioneers. And can you imagine, I've often eaten in Abdul Baha, so my father knew Baha'u'llah. And so this is I'm sorry. uh, uh, I should know who this is, and I'm going to have to make sure that we have it identified. But this is the kind of sea travel. See that boat? I mean, do you want to cross a Pacific or an Atlantic and something like that? I don't think so. It's just rocks and rolls. It's more rocks than rolls. And so then eventually she goes then down now from Brazil to Salvador, right? But you notice we had that little picture of the boat. You notice she keeps going from port to port. So she gets back on those miserable boats over and over again until she just keeps going and keeps going until she finally gets to Rio de Janeiro. Amazing. Amazing. So now, okay, so here we are now in Rio de Janeiro. And of course, here she is, the ever never ending reporter, Johnny on the spot journalist. And now you're seeing in the various newspapers and the archived old articles, that she wrote along the way, along her travels. Now, so by now, there it is, Little Ben. That's what I was talking about. Remember, I talked about that little blue booklet that she had? It's called Little Ben. And see the dime next to it? This is how tiny that Little Ben was. And we have four of them, I think, at the museum. So huh?
That's a quarter.
Oh, that's a quarter. Okay, yeah. A dime would be the way. So it's right next to the quarter, right? But you see, maybe the size of two quarters, right? Anyway, that's a Little Ben right there, and she had stacks and stacks of those in her suitcase, and because she knew she was going to keep going and keep going, and so now she gets now from Buenos Aires. This is the famous crossing now occurs, right? Where she decides, man, I'm going to go to the other. She probably decided not to go south around the Horn and come back up in Chile, but she decided the time for the crossing occurred. And I might say it's getting into, remember she was in August up there. Now we're getting into winter, right? And fall, winter. And so here we are. And we're not exactly galloping on racehorses or trains or airplanes, right? And I can just imagine if you're looking at the transportation at that time, I bet you she scooted onto one of those and rode them and, gave it a shot. And now she's going across the mountains. You know, friends, I tell you, we talk about this crossing a lot in Hawaii because to think that she joins this expedition, right? That I believe it was on donkeys, and the reason why this was so treacherous is because there was a mountain straight up, the little path just big enough for the horses, and sheer cliff down on the right hand side, right? And the people were terrified. I'm close. She was terrified, and the leader of the group obviously, tried to calm them down. But the fact that she was able to sustain her vision and thinking about Abdu'l Baha, obviously gave her purpose and vision. But this gives you here the peak of the mountains, and that's all you're looking at, more mountains and more mountains and more mountains. It's just never ending, right? And she goes up the mountain and down the mountain. You see the little trails going there, I mean, this is an incredible, the part that's really so awful. She was going there in the winter. You see what's going on? You see the guy over there and the little arrow pointing at them? And you see the passages there. I cannot imagine. I pray to God she had a good warm coat on. But she had only a tiny little suitcase. And she had 2-3 dresses, that's it. And I can only imagine how freezing cold this seems. Huh? Thank God. I know she had 3 dresses, so 3 coats and 3 dresses but here you go, right? I mean, this is what we're looking at. She makes it eventually across. And you notice she goes back out to sea. She probably said, I had it with these mountains. And I can go on about some of the crossing and stories that I read, and they're wonderful stories. So I just want to say something. So it is 18, and I don't want to wear you all out because we can always decide to make another session where we can go through the rest, right? Or I can send you the rest. But shall we say and agree that by 9 o'clock we sort of call it up for the evening? And it's 8:10 now. Are we okay on that? Okay. Now I'm okay. I'm doing this till midnight. Trust me, you don't know me. But well, maybe some of you do know me. And